And welcome back to The Point. Once again, I'm Eric Mitchell. We have a great guest for you today. I'm excited to talk to somebody from my neck of the woods, a Bay Area guy, an Oakland guy. As everybody knows, I always talk about the great Dame Lillard, from Weaver State, wearing the letter O, and he wears the letter O. It's not the letter zero, darn it, and it's not a letter. It's not a number zero. It's the letter O, and he wears it for Oaktown. So anytime you get to have somebody from Oakland on your show, it's always fun. So welcome to the show, Mike Robbins. How you doing, bud?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Yes, us Oakland folks are a proud bunch. So we love Dame Lillard down here in the Bay Area.
Oh, yeah. That is the one thing I've always loved about Oakland. With my background of doing some stuff working for the ports and the ILWU, which is created right across the bay there in San Francisco. And we'll get to what you shared offline, because I think that's a cool stat to share with people because it's pretty cool. But, Oakland is Oakland proud. And no matter when Oakland's gone through, even the gentrification that they've done to Oakland as the startups moved across the bay and they ran out of space in San Francisco, and they're like, you know what, we'll take over Oakland. Oakland is so rich in culture. It's the best food I've ever had. I always tell people some of the best eats are in Oakland. Seafood is really good. People are like, seafood? I'm like, oh yeah, under the underpass. I've eaten at some there's just hidden gems, even around the Coliseum. Good, because you park way out there. And my brother-in-law worked at a paint shop that was right down from the Coliseum, and there was the best taco trucks I've ever had. Anyway, so I could talk about food all day. I think I'm hungry recording this. So Mike, you have a book coming out, and we're leading with this because the title is something that I think we need to hear as we're in this last few days of 2020 election. Which I have so much to say on it, and I think I spend a lot of time talking about it. But your book is We're All in This Together. Is that right? That's the name of the title?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your book, just so people understand where you're coming from. And I love that because we all are in this together. It's something that I hear on Peloton. I'm a big Peloton rider. Shout out Peloton. Love for you to sponsor us. But Peloton, Team Peloton, Peloton Together, all about togetherness. So when I saw the name of your book, I was like, dude, we're going to talk about it. So a little bit about the book. Give us a little background about that. Would love to hear about it.
Well, the book actually just came out. I wrote it in 2019, finished it up, and then didn't know it was going to come out in the midst of this global pandemic, of course. But what's interesting about it, Eric, so my work for the last 20 years, I've been working with companies like Google and Wells Fargo and Microsoft and eBay and different, big organizations focused a lot on leadership and teamwork. And my background, you and I were talking about this offline. I grew up in Oakland, as you mentioned, and I played baseball growing up as a kid and got a chance to play in college at Stanford, and then got a chance to play professionally with the Kansas City Royals before I unfortunately injured my pitching arm when I was still in the minor leagues. But I learned a ton about not just sports, but about teamwork in all those years playing sports, and especially growing up in a diverse place like Oakland, California. And, writing this book was really it's my fifth book. It's sort of a culmination of a lot of the work and research that I've done over the last 20 years on what it takes to create a great team. And more than that, though, I specifically wanted it to come out in 2020 because while I didn't know we'd be going through a lot of what we've been going through this year specifically, I knew leading up to this 2020 presidential election, just given the nature of how things have been the last 4 years and quite frankly, the last couple of decades with the level of divisiveness in our country and in our world, I really wanted to put a book out this year that was about how we can find common ground with each other, even and especially when we're different or we disagree with one another.
Sorry, I'm laughing because I'm a person of hope, and we talk about leadership. Obviously, I'm a Marine. So leadership is something that I jump all over. Your book, I'm going to go run out and buy it actually when we're done here. But let's talk about this. We want everybody to be on the same page with us, but for me, leadership starts at the top. It's always how it's always been. Military teaches us that, and you've seen that too. And you mentioned some amazing companies like Google. I've worked with them. Amazing company when it comes to leadership. They also have amazing veteran programs. So does Wells Fargo. Almost everybody you listed has amazing veteran programs. So I'm like, yes. But leadership, that's an interesting topic in 2020 because we don't have that. From the top down, we don't have it because I'm going to say this, and if people agree or disagree, and this won't be the first time our audience has heard Eric say this, I see the phrase "Make America Great Again," and as a leader, I go, "Well, when was it great?"
Right.
Do we list that after, and I'm going to say this, after wars? Do we list that? But then I think of all the fallen, because we got national cemeteries in San Francisco, at Arlington, throughout the country. We have national cemeteries full. We're in 20 years of war right now with Iraq and Afghanistan. That hasn't ended, and we've had another guy go in there and stir up stuff because he's buddies with everybody who wants to kill us. I mean, we got bounties on the heads of our troops, and that's ignored. So leadership to me is interesting. So how do you counter that when people look at 2020 and think, oh, leadership? The very person who's a leader, number one, he hates the military. When you think of leadership, you think of military, because you look at Bob Parsons from GoDaddy. You look at, oh my goodness, Mike Smith from FedEx. You look at all these amazing veterans who, they're nobody special, but they're amazing veterans that have created business. Then you look at guys like General James Mattis and General Kelly and General McAllister and General, not Flynn, because Flynn was a bad guy. Now he's a good guy again. I don't understand how that works.
Right.
I mean, it's just weird. But you look at Colin Powell and all these. How do you go in front of these businesses and go, here's leadership 2020, be a good who do you use as a leader? Like, what's your example?
Well, I think look, we can, this as well or better than I do. We can learn a lot about leadership, both examples of great leaders and also examples of leaders that aren't so great. One of the things, though, that I think about with respect to the current president and the environment that we're in, look, here's the reality. We don't know what's going to happen in the election, but if we just look at the numbers, it's hard to tell exactly what turnout's going to be. Roughly about 60 million people are going to vote for each of the two candidates, give or take. And my hope is that more people vote for Joe Biden and that Joe Biden wins. However, my question often is to myself and to so many people around me, how do we continue to move forward as Americans, as an example, or just human beings in the world, when we disagree with each other? And one of the biggest concerns that I have right now, and I'm sure you talk about this here on your show and know, is that we're living in a world that's so bifurcated. We're literally dealing with different sets of information and facts, we can even call them facts, in terms of how we, get information and get the news. And so in terms of leadership, though, there's so much about what I talk about in my work and what I know from research is that leadership is about authenticity, it's about courage, and it's also about how people feel in your presence and, with you as the leader. Do people feel safe? Can people trust you? Can people follow you? And so much of that is what my work is about. And look, at the end of the day, I have strong opinions, like it sounds like you do, and I'm sure everybody listening to us and watching us, about who should be the leader of the United States in terms of the president. But whatever happens, ultimately, we got to figure out how we're going to get along with each other, no matter who wins the election.
True. That is the true part. But then again, then I'll spin this to you. And this is shocking, a show host spinning something. But I promise I won't do it Hannity. I'm not going to put a camera in front of Joe Biden's house. That's just creepy stuff that he does. Either way, people are going to be happy, and either way, people are going to be upset the way that this election goes. We all know that. It's also going to challenge a lot of things that we've never seen before. As Americans, we're used to our TV set magically telling us around midnight that who our new president is. That probably will not happen unless every poll and everything we believe, and I stopped believing polls a long time ago, everything we believe is that these amazing turnouts that we're seeing around the country with voters standing in line for hours in Georgia and in Florida. Amen to those people doing that. Hopefully they're voting for Joe Biden while they're doing it. But the fact that voter suppression is something that we're concerned about, we're going to have to see these numbers come in where emotions are going to ride this roller coaster. After the morning of November 4th, we will see that. My fear is this, it's good. You're an athlete. I'm a military guy. We get along. Our brains are wired very much similar. We're ultra competitive. We don't like to lose. You guys lose games. We have our ultimate thing is people die. It's kind of bad, but we are competitive and we depend on teamwork, and we understand what leadership means. You need a leader. We all become individual leaders, but as a team, it's important. And no, I love Kobe to death, and I totally love it when people said that there's no I in team, but Kobe responded, but there is a mother effing I in win. So love me some Cobes. But when it comes to leadership, will be the morning of November 4th. Who's going to step forward and quell whatever bad, awful things will happen? Because we know they will. You'll either have one side upset because from what I'm hearing, whether it be true or not, and I'm going to say it because it makes me feel warm and fuzzy, a lot of people believe that this is going to be a blowout. A lot of people believe, and not the blowout for the orange man, but a blowout for people for Joe Biden. Old people are sick and tired. People in the 65 and older are sick of the disrespect. I mean, and the dude disrespecting is old too, so I don't understand, like, he forgets how old he is. He also can't dance, and he also has COVID. But anyways, completely separate subjects, and he's a racist. Sorry, I'm getting them all out. Hold on, let me finish them all out. And he believes all SEAL Team 6 was killed. He's an idiot.
Right.
But who steps forward? How do we find a leader through this? Because obviously Joe Biden's not going to be able to step forward and say anything, because they're going to hit this time where they're going to go and do their thing. And how do we fix that? Because our country right now is divided. I mean, how quickly did Camilla Harris, born in Oakland, California, how many seconds did it take for somebody on the right to say, was she born here? You know, the birthers came flying out. The king of birthers came, you know, he always, Barack Obama wasn't born. He was born in Hawaii, bro. And by the way, that's a state, you know,
Well, I think it's going to require everybody. I mean, you know, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, you know, people that, you know, the Colin Powells of the world, people in the media, people in business. I mean, everybody. I do feel like this is an all hands on deck moment for our country. You know, my belief, to your point, looking at a lot of the data and talking to people, there's a possibility it could be a lopsided victory in Biden's favor. I think that's actually what would be best for the country, not just because those are my political leanings, although of course I'm sure that influences it, but I think ultimately a decisive win by Biden will take away, you know, some sense of, you know, wrongdoing or shenanigans going on. That said, I do think that in the next bit of time before the election and then after the election, it is really important that voices of reason, you know, measured, you know this from the military better than I do. It's like when the stakes are really high, what you need are voices that can speak with authority, but also can calm people down. You know, and of the many reasons I think, and you've spoken to a number of them, many of my concerns on a leadership level of what we've been dealing with in our country over the last 4 years is there's just not a calm voice in the storm of everything that's going on. And that is part of why I actually think it's important for all of us, whatever positions of leadership we might find ourselves in. Again, how do we speak and communicate and operate in a way that brings people together, that finds common ground? You know, I'm a big believer of the idea that it's really hard for us to hate each other up close. So the closer we get to each other, and that's something that I learned growing up with all of the difference and diversity in a place like Oakland. Not a lot of kids that I played sports with growing up looked like me. But as we hung out and spent time together and got to know each other and realized, we had differences culturally, and I'd go to their house and they'd come to my house and there were some different things going on. But at the end of the day, it's like we're way more alike than we are different. And I don't mean to oversimplify some of the difficulty around diversity and race and other issues that we have in our country. But I just think we've sort of bought into this notion, and social media and the media as a whole sort of feeds it, that we're so different and we're so divided. I actually, without being naive, don't think that's actually as true as it seems.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I want to say this, because California is trashed all the time. And I'm a former Californian, and I love California. We have family in California. Shout out to all my family there, and I'm actually heading to California this weekend. Absolutely love California. Now, you guys get trashed. Apparently, you guys have exploding trees. I didn't know that existed, but those recently appeared. After going to high school right outside the Sierra Nevadas in beautiful Folsom, California, I never saw these trees explode, but apparently they do. But that's not my point. By the way, can you go please rake the forest? You're in Marin, so go rake the forest. Go do that right now. Those exploding trees. But the people of Oakland, they get a bad rap all the time. People are like, oh, it's violent. I can tell you this from getting out of the Marine Corps and looking for work, and my late father-in-law, loved the man to death, it got me into the ILWU to make sure I could feed my family. The people I was around, they definitely didn't look like me. They come from mean streets of Oakland. When you listed where you went to high school, I know exactly where that is. I know, all of, isn't Bishop O'Dowd down there too? Isn't that
Bishop O'Dowd is the Catholic school,
Yeah, I know. It's funny, I know all the sports schools. Shocking.
Yeah, great sports. Great sports. And then St. Joe's, where Jason Kidd went's over in Alameda, so
So my brother-in-law actually lived over by Bishop O'Dowd. There's a Shell station, and anyways, that's just how you get there when you take that. Anyways, that's a whole other story. But Oakland is interesting, and you brought this up off camera, so we're going to bring it up now because I think the diversity in Oakland is the epitome to what I wish that the rest of America could be like. People of Oakland, they don't have a chip on their shoulder. They're not like, oh God. Instead, they're very loving and embracing to everybody. If long as you don't have hate in your heart, for the most part, there's always criminals. So I'm not going to be like, oh, they're like 3 drug dealers. No, those people obviously suck, but drug dealers are in every city, so that doesn't count. But like Oakland and the Bay Area for itself, it's a cultural melting pot. Working in the Silicon Valley, same with you. You've worked with tech brands just like I have. I've been acquired 3 times. One of the greatest things I love is the fact that I can have a conversation from people from around the world at lunch. And we're all alike. Do you think that pays a difference? Like California gets just slandered. Oh, they're all peaceniks, hippies. And I don't look at California as that. I look at innovation that, we kind of have that chill surfer dude stuff that SoCal has, but we're very coming. Like you talked about off air that the ILWU, which is the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, which is where the ports come from, and the largest ports in the country happen to be in Long Beach, LA, and in Seattle, Washington, and the biggest one is in Oakland and San Francisco, that amazing ILWU that they have there. Now, a lot of folks from the African American community moved from the East Coast to Oakland. And what did you say the reason was? I loved it, and I just want to make sure
it was basically, from my understanding, it was after World War II. There were a lot of African Americans from the East, but particularly from the South, who found out that there were jobs available at the Port of Oakland specifically, but in the Bay Area, and that there was a level of openness and tolerance to hire African Americans, which wasn't the case in the 40s in a lot of places in the country. And it's not, I'm sure there was definitely racism that existed in the Bay Area and in California at that time, but relatively speaking, a lot of the kids that I grew up with playing baseball, their parents and their grandparents, they were 2nd or 3rd generation in the Bay Area, but had come and sort of migrated from elsewhere in the US so that they could be here. And one of the things I think, look, I love California, born and raised in Oakland, been in the Bay Area my whole life. I think, look, if you take California out of the union, right, you think of the entertainment and the technology and innovation that exists here, but there's also quite a bit of diversity, not just even racial diversity, but different parts of the state, whether it's Folsom, where we have my brother and sister-in-law live there, or Stockton or Bakersfield. Those places are actually more representative of like the middle of the country than the coast. And then if you come to San Francisco or you go to Los Angeles, both wonderful cities, or even San Diego, all very different, not only beautiful, but just a very different vibe in all 3 of those places, or you go somewhere like Sacramento, you grew up near there. So, I actually think we get a bad rap, but maybe because we're also sort of arrogant and self-absorbed, we don't really care. We just kind of do our own thing. And if people want to say things about us, it's like, whatever, come on out here and enjoy the weather. Yeah, it's a little expensive, but
I think that's the whole West Coast. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, most of us have moved. If we move to a state up north, we're all former Californians. Like everybody I run into is like, what part of California are you from? It's just like, that's kind of standard answer.
In Portland and Seattle, there's a ton of Californians just because people migrated. It was a little cheaper, although it's not that much cheaper these days. Right?
It is funny. I know you're a Warriors fan, so you'll love this, that when you guys show up here, your fans roll really deep here, and most of them are wearing Blazer jerseys the night before. But I'm telling you, the Bay Area comes out deep when it comes to there. We have a lot of love. Obviously, we have the legend from Oakland on our team, so that brings it out. And it's a great experience. I mean, the Warriors are great. But, I mean, we talk about leadership. We talk about California. We talk about, it's funny. You brought up Stockton. You brought up Bakersfield. And it drives me to go, okay, well, if those are so much, kind of describe so much of our country, how come the rest of our country seems so far behind? I mean, there's still people who utterly believe racism. I mean, I've told this story on the show. I appeared right after the NBA had their protest after, and I went on Fox, which is probably my first problem. But I went on Fox and I was asked a question about it, and I basically said that the question was built around the players. And I said, well, these players didn't grow up with millions of dollars in their pockets. I mean, Dame Lillard wore a white t-shirt because that's all his mom could afford. It wasn't because he was in a gang and he got beat up, shaken down. He's not a big dude as it is. I mean, he's a full-grown man at 6'1", okay? So he's not gigantic. I actually look him in the eye, so I feel pretty good about myself. But, I was attacked after that. And I didn't say anything political in nature. I didn't go there, but I had people call me up in the middle of the country. They called our office hotline. can I speak to Eric? And I'm like, unfortunately, I picked up the phone on that Monday morning, and it was some dude who used more racism than I've ever heard. And I'm not around racism. I'm just not. I live in the West. I've always been that way. And you're right. You described the vibe from San Diego to the Bay. It's drastically different. Trust me, they take things a lot slower than us Bay Area folk do. Us tech people, we move. It's like, process, done. They're like, all right, we'll get there. We'll get there. Just calm down. Right. It's okay. And I'm like, how much cannabis have you got? So how do we bring what we have here on the West Coast? Let's do the whole thing, because I think California basically is the West Coast. Right. How do we give that? And if you're a leader, how do we share that? How do we pass this message out to our friends in the middle who seem to not understand that there's a way that everybody that, oh, you don't understand somebody from India's accent? It's second nature to me. Go to Fremont, California. You'll pick up on it real fast. Just go into doctor, say 5 days. You'll get it down. Also, the only place where you'll get a Tesla driver driving an Uber. But
that's true. Look, I think there's a couple things. I mean, I think first of all, part of it, you think of California or the West Coast, it's exposure. Right? Yeah. When you're exposed to things, if you go to the East Coast, you spend time in New York City, you spend time in Philadelphia. Like these places, especially on the East Coast, even more so than the West Coast, it's not that division doesn't exist. It's not that racism doesn't exist. There's more exposure to different people, different cultures, different things. And again, like I was saying earlier, it's really hard to hate people up close when you get to know people and you realize, yeah, we're different, but there's so much common ground that we have as human beings. And sometimes, not to give people a pass, but what I feel, and I've spent a lot of time over the last 20 years, traveling around the U.S., traveling around the world. You know, I'm not on planes and doing much traveling these days because of COVID. But when I do travel to different parts of the United States, and I'm around people who are more conservative in the way that they think, and some of the ideas may bother me or I may take offense to, without giving them a pass, what I often notice is, oh, there's just a lack of understanding or a lack of awareness or lack of exposure. And when we don't experience something, it's easy to get scared about it or to make up stuff that's not true. And so I think, if I lived in Oklahoma or if I lived in Missouri and I listened to certain radio stations and I watched certain TV stations and I followed certain people on social media, my worldview would be very different than growing up in Oakland and living in California and doing what I do. Again, that's not to say that we're not all adults and we don't get to choose. But part of what leadership is about and part of what makes great teams and gets people to open their minds is to be exposed to different things. And that's also to say, look, there are a lot of sort of fundamental things built into the system. If you talk to any woman, you talk to any person of color, you and I are straight white guys. That doesn't mean our lives are perfect. But there are a lot of privileges that we have and things that we don't see. Even if we think we're relatively aware or woke, there's a bunch of stuff going on beneath the surface that we can't even pay attention to because it's just not on our radar.
True. I agree with you, because that's I think that's sound advice. I'll go with that. I like that. That's what we need, because we do, no matter what, at the end of the day, I'm a white guy in his 40s who hasn't experienced a lot of things. I mean, my experiences with racism come from people on the outside. One time in Folsom, crossing the bridge and finding a racist cop because my buddy, Kariba Kunta Kinte Royale, love you, Karib. There's a guy in a car, and of course, cops in Folsom, California, if you've ever been there, back in the 90s, Folsom wasn't as diverse as it is today.
Right.
And it was interesting. Cops were like, what is a white guy and a black dude, teenagers doing in a black Buick? We thought we were cool, and we were bumping like, I don't know, some horrible music, I'm sure. Probably Too Short or E40, by the way. Yeah. Guaranteed to be from the Bay, because that's all you play in NorCal is.
Exactly.
You're loyal. Always loyal to the cause. Maybe Hammer. You never know. It might have been Hammer. We don't know. A white guy was driving the car. Could have been Hammer.
It only could be Hammer for a certain amount of time, and then it was not cool anymore.
Yeah. When he did Too Legit to Quit, it was like, bro, you're not hardcore. Stop. Just be, can't touch this. That's what matters, Hammer. But, that's what we experience, and I just think some people have never experienced it. I mean, I guess there's people in our country have never seen anybody other than a white person, which is shocking growing up in California or even Florida I was born in Central Florida, but I go to New York all the time. And I think that's why I like cities like that. That's why I vibe in the Bay. I vibe really well in LA. I love New York. I mean, I'm a diehard Beastie Boys fan. It's the first concert I went to was the Beastie Boys and Run DMC. I mean,
Nice.
to me, culture is everything, and I'm amazed by so many people who have it. For a country that's so diverse, has had an amazing black president. I love Barack Obama, just amazing things that he did. To see us be here in 2020, we're overcoming so much that our kids don't, I mean, my kids are teenagers. They look at this as like, Dad, how the hell have you people, what have you done for 40 some odd years? Why are we dealing with this? Why is it stuck on our generation? And also, why is our generation Generation Z? So there's no other generations past us? I was like, I don't know. I didn't name that. That's not my doing. We're Gen X. Somehow we skipped letters. And millennials came in between us. I don't know. We went back.
I know.
But, I mean, my last question before you go. Where do we go from here? What as a leader, where do we go from here? You mentioned Google's being attacked. Social media is being attacked. To me, social media is not bad. I don't do anything bad on social. I don't go after, I go after Republicans on my Twitter account, but doesn't everybody? Where do we go from here? How do we fix, as a leader, what would you say as a leader, how do we fix, I'm trying to put this sentence together and my Marine brain is like, ooh, squirrel, and all these things. How do we come together and fix what has been ripped? There's a big rip. There's a big tear. How do we bring that together and mold it? Because, like it or not, there's going to be a new president or the same one.
Right.
We're going to have to figure it out. We're all going to have to get along. We cannot go another year because 2020 has been awful. I think in 2020 it was like revved up the hate. We need to dial that back down because at the end of the day, we all need each other. We have to work together. You shouldn't hate on your family because of who somebody votes for. It used to be a private thing. Now it's like very public. And
well, look, I think the first thing we have to do, all of us, is tell the truth about what's going on and where we're at. I also think it's a process of taking ownership. It's easy to point fingers and to blame people, but I think of one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King. He said, "We have no morally persuasive power with those who can feel our underlying contempt for them."
I love that.
So think about that. We have no morally persuasive power with those who can feel our underlying contempt for them. So moving away from this us versus them mentality, which is hard to do in the heat of a debate, in the heat of a presidential election. And let's be honest, whether you voted for Donald Trump or not, he never stopped running. So we've been in a 4-year-long presidential campaign that never ended, that went away. Most people, including him, didn't expect was going to go in 2016. And it's just ratcheted up and ratcheted up and ratcheted up. And so one of the many reasons that I hope Joe Biden wins is it can change the trajectory and change the conversation to, okay, we've been fighting like crazy, but you can't fight 100% of the time. There's no family or team or group or organization that exists constantly fighting all the time, because then what's the point? So we have to figure out some way. Yes, we can debate and disagree. Yes, we can have different values and beliefs, but we got to figure out and remember, without sounding corny and not just plugging my book, but we literally are all in this thing together. If this ship sinks, we all sink on it. So we got to figure out how to help each other out.
You know, that's funny you say that, because anything else is as dysfunctional as this. If it was a professional sports team, you and I both know we'd be cutting some players or making some trades because there's way too much dysfunction, way too much people talking. You're right, divisiveness. And you're right, he did run. He's been running for 4 years. Yeah. It's been one big rally after another, it feels like. So I hope everybody vote. I mean, number one, I hope everybody votes. I think that's one of the most important things as Americans. I'm a huge West Wing fan, so I geeked out when they had the West Wing reunion. And they touched on a lot of things, because you look at that, and when I say West Wing, liberals and Democrats are always like, great show. Republicans, especially the alt-right, will be like, that show's just liberal garbage. But it brings up a lot of points that we really haven't changed that much. That show brings up things that are the same things in American history over and over again. Someone doesn't like us. We have a lot of issues that we need to fix, and we still have them. I mean, the Native Americans in our country, the fact that that's still like, hey, we don't care about you. So what if we killed everybody and we're going to build our pipeline through here and you're going to deal with it? There's a lot that we need to do, but I think guys like Joe Biden will actually come in and make a difference. And I think people have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. I think that's something I learned in leadership as I went through, different training, being around leaders. We have a general who is an advisor for our agency, and it's amazing pinging his brain and hearing what he has to say, because literally leadership comes down to fight or flight, how you're going to survive. You've got to go through the good and bad. And a truly a good leader, and you could tell me I'm wrong, But to me, a true leader falls on his sword when he's wrong and he owns his mistakes and fixes them.
Sure.
Doesn't blame, doesn't yell fake news, goes, you know what, I screwed up, but we'll fix this together, because we have to fail forward. You and I both work in tech. We both understand failure makes us better. Trust me, acquired 3 times. I could tell you, we screwed up a lot of things, but we made it better. Getting it to 80% was like a goal. We got it to 80%. We'll get the other 20%, but let's launch it. Let's go. We know we're going to fail. How many people say that? I'm sure you've heard 90% of all startups fail. This is stuff ingrained in the Bay Area that you're just like, I know that number. So anyways, I want to thank you. So before you go, tell people how they can get your book since it's just out. I'm going to guess Amazon. I'm going to guess is where they can go get it. Sure. Barnes & Noble?
Yeah, wherever you like to get books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. The best place, though, is probably at our website, which is mike-robbins.com. Awesome.
And we'll put all your social up. So, folks, Mike Robbins here. We'll have all of his links for you to go check out. So if you're watching on C-Suite TV, C-Suite, I always say that way too fast. C-Suite TV, you can scroll down and find all his information there. Go buy his book. We're going to go grab a couple copies. We're going to mail them to Mike and have him sign them, and we're going to give away a couple. That's what we're doing. By the way, Mike, that's what we're doing. So
sounds good.
Just so you know, we're planning that as we go. This is how we run. That's how we run this show. So I want to thank you for joining us. We'll have you back real soon, probably after the election, to see where we could go. Maybe we'll have a new leadership, because the following question I'll have for you, and I'll leave it for when you come back, and put this in your head. What do we do with a Biden as president-elect, leadership for the next 100 days between now and January 20th? It could be, it's the fear factor, right? New president-elect and a president leaving who's publicly said he won't leave, and what he'll do before he leaves. And remember, we used to be upset that somebody took all the W's out of a keyboard when Clinton left. That was the biggest, like, woohoo! We're worried about the guy who won't leave. He wants to be a squatter. So that's what we have. So I want to thank you for coming on. It's been great, as usual, having an amazing guest on, talking about all my favorite things. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you real soon.
Let's get to the point.